I deserve to be here because I feel like I don't deserve to be here. I belong here because so many others have told me that I don't. When people describe growing up surrounded by the joy of nature, I can't relate. When they describe parents, family members that taught them to cherish and nurture our natural environment, I can't relate. When they describe the heartbreak they felt watching climate destruction firsthand, I can't relate. Growing up as part of the generation consumed by the climate crisis, I've been asking myself, why am I here? I stand here as a young person, a working class woman who's had to grow up too quickly. I stand here with the weight of the climate crisis on my shoulders, the baton of hope and inspiration hanging heavy in my hand. The decision of not wanting to have children, buried deep in my soul, for fear of what my future holds. And I don't stand here alone. I stand here with and for every young person who has ever been called a snowflake, whilst they plead with their parents to be heard. So, how did I get here? I grew up in Blackpool, an incredibly urban landscape, but by the seaside. I love the sea. We're at the top of so many leadership boards, just all of the bad ones. We're the most economically deprived, the least educated, and have the worst living environments. Growing up in the UK means that I've never experienced the first-hand effects of the climate crisis. But being from Blackpool means that I didn't have the capacity to worry about it. I grew up with climate privilege without having the privilege to worry about our climate crisis. Yet the natural world was always something that fascinated me. Growing up, me and my family would visit what I like to call manufactured nature spaces, where non-native flowers thrived and where grass grew in straight lines. I was always drawn to the wildness and the power that our natural environment held, and I was curious as to what existed outside of these manicured spaces. So, at 18, I managed to break through the ceiling and attend university to study sustainability. I was among the first generation of my family to do this, and for a long time it didn't feel like an option to me. With it, it felt like my small bubble was suddenly expanded, and I started to learn about life outside of Blackpool. I learnt about far-off, beautiful places, and the complexities and interconnectedness of our planet and our societies. I felt awe and wonder. Home no longer meant Blackpool, but this planet that I shared with 7 billion other people. But what I hadn't anticipated was that this love and my fascination for the natural world would soon turn to fear. I started to learn about our climate and ecological crisis for the first time. I read the statistics. 50% of forests destroyed. 2/3 of wildlife exterminated. The headlines that described a doomsday clock counting down just 7 years to save humanity. I was no longer worried about getting a good job after university, but how much of the world would be on fire when I graduated. It's difficult to describe the deep and existential grief, the fear that comes with a lack of security for your future, the feeling of only living for the next 7 years. By 21, I was feeling isolated and increasingly desolate. I was speaking to my parents, showing them intangible graphs of the rising frequency of large-scale weather events and just pleading with them to believe me. I was going into lectures, being told of the urgency of this crisis, but given no solutions and no tools to take change. After speaking to my classmates, I realised that so many of them felt the same. Recent research surveying 10,000 young people in 10 countries found that 56% of us feel that humanity is doomed, and that 70% of us experience eco-anxiety every day. So I don't stand here alone. I stand here with Harithik from India, who faces the consequences of urban air pollution every day, and with Shaylotte from South Africa, who's been overwhelmed by the droughts that have taken hold of her community. I stand here with and for young people in frontline communities who are already experiencing the first-hand effects of the climate crisis, for whom feeling eco-anxious isn't a choice. Now, eco-anxiety is a very healthy response to a crisis, and it's what can light the flame in your heart to take action. But so often those feelings of eco-anxiety shift to feelings of powerlessness, fueled by the apathy of decision makers. So-called leaders are tuning out of the scientists and laughing off the young people that are screaming that we're hurtling towards a cliff. They're putting red tape in front of decisions that just aren't that complicated. The baton of hope and responsibility is so often given to young people. Young people will inherit the worst effects of this climate crisis, yet we're systematically excluded from the decisions governing our future. I don't feel seen, or heard, or cared about, or like I deserve to even be there in the first place. They're playing with my life like it's an inconvenience and trivializing it to a political talking point. At 21, when I left university, I knew I wanted to find home in helping people and our planet. But I really struggled to come to terms with my own story and how it differed from others. I struggled to see the value in my own voice, and I didn't have enough self-belief to enter rooms that had been told I didn't belong. This is something that I continually battled with. Feelings of inadequacy, feeling too small to make a difference. To get where I am today, I had to learn two things. One is that the most important qualification in taking action on the climate crisis is simply that you care. And the second is that if there isn't space for you, then you have to make it. Now, I want to be vulnerable with you, and I want you to be vulnerable with yourself. I have days of practicing nothing but hope. The days where I'm surrounded by other youth activists all over the world doing incredible things. The days where decision makers invite me into the room. And there are the days where the sadness hangs heavy. When I avoid going to sleep, terrified of the apocalyptic dreams. When the suicidal ideation creeps into the corners of my eyes, taunting me. Feeling like I want to give up, of seeing no progress. Recently, a peer asked me what I would be doing if the world wasn't on fire. Today, as the COO of Force of Nature, a youth non-profit empowering decision makers and young people alike, I have the privilege of working for our planet. But this question took me off guard. I haven't thought about the opportunity that my future holds in over 10 years. I haven't stopped to imagine a different life for myself in over 10 years. Now, briefly, I allowed myself to imagine parallel universes, a world where my very existence wasn't at threat, a world where I'm a singer or a baker, an ice cream lady, my first dream job. Why am I here? It's a difficult question, but I feel like I finally have the answer. It's the moral obligation that I feel to act, fueled by despair. It's the resilience that forces me to recognize that I belong in rooms where I've been told that I don't. It's the injustice that I feel that forces me to not only enter the room quietly, but to kick the door down on my way in. And it's the hope that I feel which allows me to continue creating a world by my own design. Have you ever walked into a room and noticed someone was missing? In climate action, that list can seem endless. I deserve to be here because I feel like I don't deserve to be here. And I belong here because so many others haven't noticed when I have been missing, it's up to each and every one of us to change that.